Hello, everyone. Welcome to a PAX Talk, Fertile Ground Collaboration in Art and Ecology with Jennifer McGregor. This talk was originally presented on December 5th, 2024, but because of an exciting glitch with our recording, we're recording it again. My name is Renee Paichaki. I'm an artist and public art consultant, and I am a part of Public Art Exchange, the colleagues group that is sponsoring this talk. I'm really pleased to introduce you to Jennifer McGregor. She is a curator and arts planner. I've worked with Jennifer for a long time, and some of the things we've worked on are the Laramie Public Art Plan and Laramie, Wyoming Public Art Plan in 2015, the Rose Kennedy Greenway Art Plan in Boston, Massachusetts, and recently the Port's art strategy for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. We also worked together a long time ago in the first years of the Public Art Network. In today's talk, she draws on her curatorial work at Wave Hill in the Bronx, New York, where she was instrumental in elevating Wave Hill as a destination for innovative art related to nature, culture, and sight. She continues her place-based curating, focusing on ecological, historical, and cultural concerns, working most recently with Rivers Flow, Artists Connect at the Hudson River Museum in Yonkers, and Shared Dialogue, Shared Space for the Korea Art Forum as outdoor sites in New York. So really pleased to welcome you, Jennifer, and I'm excited to hear your talk today.
Well, thank you, Renee, for that kind introduction, and it's always fun to be with you. I'm grateful to you and Laura Zorch McDermott and Kip Koyabashi for inviting me to speak today. And for those of you who are new to PAX, this is a really dynamic and valuable platform for sharing information, and I really encourage you to get involved. So it's been really fun for me to prepare for today's talk. And some of the things I've reflected on are the difference between working in the built environment and working with landscape, the ways that strategies have evolved through different generations of artists, and how, as an administrator and curator, I've facilitated many collaborations in art and ecology. So in terms of working with the built environment, coming as a young artist working in different sites led me to the public work at the Public Art Fund and then the New York City Percent for Art program in the 1980s. There I was guided by liaisons from various city agencies who taught me about the systems that make the city work. We'd drive through the 5 boroughs scoping out sites that had the right prerequisites of capital funding and community connections. It was encouraging to be able to collaborate with colleagues in arts and government to create program guidelines that could foster creativity within the bureaucratic constraints. I was grateful for the opportunity to lay the groundwork for the program and initiate the first 60 projects. This experience served me well when I left to work nationally as a consultant on public art planning, commissions, and exhibitions throughout the country. One of my consulting projects was to develop the visual arts program at Wave Hill, a magical public garden in the Bronx. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Wave Hill, it's a very special oasis at the edge of the city with sweeping views of the Hudson River and the Palisades rock formations. This was a real shifting point to start working with nature and landscape for the next 2 decades. And there I developed place-based curating at a site where I could focus on a specific location, its ecology, its cultural and natural history, and have a very distinct relationship to visitors. It was also a platform to be able to experiment with different topics related to specific areas of the garden, or 19th century literary associations to landscape, or the impact that former residents had on the site. We took multiple topics through exhibitions, residencies, and programs. And as Renee noted, since then, I've continued to work on interdisciplinary projects. So in today's talk, I'll be speaking about the work of 6 artists who I've worked with, and it's divided into 3 sections that are sort of punctuated by references of how I've worked with them. So let's start I need to have permission to share the screen.
Permission granted.
Okie doke. So let's just see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, now let me put it into the slideshow mode. Okay, great. See it now?
Looks terrific.
Okay, terrific. So fast forwarding today, where the built environment clashes with the natural environment in my workspace in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx during one of those flash flood summer storms. Besides the wall of rain, the ominous wall of rain, we see a waterfront that's filled with oil tanks and private trash depots. There's multiple modes of transportation. In the foreground are the train tracks used by Amtrak between New York and Boston. Hourly ferries and shipping activity is in the bay. Airplanes land continuously at LaGuardia Airport beyond. Visible from other windows are the Bruckner Expressway and the Whitestone and Throgs Neck bridges to Queens. With the open skyline and views of the uninhabited North and South Brother Islands, plus the spontaneous tree growth along the railroad tracks, it's a reminder that we're part of nature, which is something that is particularly important to me. So artists engaging in the environment is not new, although the anxiety about climate change has amped things up with institutions, organizations, and government programs looking to engage with artists and art to explore ecology. In this work, we stand on the shoulders of many artists, and the first two that I'll be talking about today are Patricia Johansson and Jackie Bruckner, whose trailbreaking work opened up possibilities for the artists who followed them. Both began as studio artists and developed a collaborative approach to working with ecology through public projects that are integrated into the landscape. So throughout her long career, Patricia Johansson has created transformative ecological art in the landscape that provides care and healing for wildlife, plants, soil, as much as it does for people. She's built significant projects that are integrated into the landscape in Dallas, San Francisco, and Salt Lake City, among others. One of the reasons I'd like to focus on her today is that she passed away, sadly, this fall. And I'm grateful to Eco Art Space for hosting a tribute to her in November and to the insights provided by Sue Spade and others. As a young abstract painter, Patricia was approached by House and Garden magazine to design and create a garden in 1969. This was something very new and different to her, and she embarked on what resulted as a series of 150 drawings that explore features of the American landscape and focus on particular natural processes. While the scope and the scale of the drawings was beyond what House and Garden had in mind, this formative project launched a shift in her thinking from the canvas to the landscape. And it's a really interesting example of the way that commissions can be a springboard for artists to move out of their comfort zone and develop new ways of thinking. So in this, there are 4 groups of drawings, and this one is from Gardens That Are Out of Sight. And I'm showing the Vanishing Point Garden Sacred Trees. And here we're looking at her concept for a series of gardens that are basically kind of oases of the plants needed for monarch migration. And they would be planted along the coasts and heading towards Mexico. One of the things that's really interesting about this particular drawing is that this was developed before people really understood the path of monarch migration. Another series of her drawings were artificial gardens, and this is plateaus and sinks. For those of you who are interested in learning more about this really fantastic work, there was an exhibition at the Houston Gallery at Bennington College, which is on their website. and the 2-volume set of Patricia Johansson's House and Garden Commission's Reconstruction of Modernity by Jin Wu, published by the Dumbarton Oaks Research Library and Collection, is an excellent source of information. This project offers a very stark contrast to the land art projects that were getting attention at the same time. To put this in context, Richard Smithson completed Spiral Jetty in Utah's Salt Lake in 1970, the following year. And I think we can all agree that that projects like Patricia's haven't gotten the same kind of recognition. So let's fast forward to an aerial view of one of her projects, the Ellis Creek Water Recycling Facility. It's a 45-acre multi-purpose public landscape. And I'd like to start with her words. For years, I sought to embed major urban infrastructure within nature, beginning with the 1969 House and Garden drawings. The Ellis Creek Water Recycling Facility processes sewage within the context of art, public access, habitat restoration, and agriculture. It is clearly designed by an artist, but the goals have shifted to create an inclusive, sustainable world within human infrastructure. So this is a very highly research-based project that provides a place for wildlife to thrive, and it requires close collaboration with engineers to create something that's integrated into a functioning water treatment system. So here we're looking at the entire system, and the polishing ponds here, which is the section that where Patricia was most involved in the design. It's in the form of a salt marsh harvest mouse. And here we see the kind of the nose of the mouse at this end and the tail of the mouse at this end. And we're going to be looking at her drawings for this particular section. So we can see her working in a similar mode to the House and Garden drawings, but here she's paying particular attention to how the visitor will interact with the landscape. She's showing the trails to different aspects of the site, an amphitheater seating, an orange bench, telescope to view the islands, all different features that will help us enjoy this wildlife sanctuary. So she was engaged in this project from 2004 to 2009, which isn't uncommon for a public art project of this scale, but really required very hands-on work from her to make sure that it was realized as she intended. In public art and ecological art, we often grapple about how to measure success. For Patricia, she noted that my projects succeed if they perform as intended, if people like them, and if life perpetuates itself within the functional and aesthetic framework. By that measure, this is a highly successful project. The year after it was completed, we featured Ellis Creek in Remediate Revision, Public Artists Engaging the Environment, an exhibition at Wave Hill that showcased 12 projects by public artists that raised awareness about watershed fragility, industrial and natural history, and ecological balance. And here's a photo of the catalog from the show that indicates how we presented her project within the context of the gallery. It included a video interview that was done with Eco Art Space and multiple drawings of her concept, and then the thriving wildlife that already was existing at the site. So now I'd like to turn to Jackie Bruckner, who's known for her ecological projects. And like Patricia Johansson, her work is grounded in the belief that we are all part of nature. As you'll see from the presentation, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Jackie in a number of ways. And the first one was commissioning I'm You, a sculpture that she created for Abundant Invention, my second exhibition in Glendale Gallery at Wave Hill. She jumped at the chance to make this circulating fountain to purify water. The form of this structure is based on how what moss looks like under the microscope. And the way that it's created is an armature with volcanic rock on the surface. And here we see the moss growing throughout. The project was up for about 3 months, and initially it was just the rock with little bits of moss, and over the course of the 3 months, the moss really flourished. What we see here in the picture are these sprays that are similar to the sprays that you see in the vegetable department of a supermarket. And they sprayed water from a pool below that had grasses and fish. And we would put dirty water into the pool, and it would be cleansed through this circulating system. This was part of a series of sculptures that were prototypes for later artworks. And in this way, the gallery could be a place to test her work outside the studio and gauge the public's interest. And this type of testing opportunity was something that I tried to offer many times at Wave Hill. So here's Jackie speaking about her public project, Vedanteka, in the Remediate Revision exhibition. And interestingly, like Patricia's project, this project is part of a municipal sewage treatment facility. So it's a collaboration between local volunteers, regional scientists, and students and faculty at the Polytechnic Institute, along with the Salo Parks Department and Office of Environmental Protection. So 3 floating islands were created, 1 for nesting birds and 2 for the phytoremediation. The plumes of spray that we see are part of the idea to indicate that this is actually a human-made structure and not something that's part of the landscape. And plus, since they're floating, they move around a little bit in the pond. Here's a diagram of how the island is built and the way that the plants break down the microorganisms in the water. And here's the students at work helping to create. Oh, I wanted to mention that the design was created with local scientists. And as you can see here, it was built with the students from the Polytechnic Institute. The materials were sourced locally, and we can see these lightweight rocks being moved onto the island. So it was really important to Jackie that this was not only conceived with the local community, but actually built by the students, so that they would take ownership of the project. And also she worked with a local artist who was the manager for the project. At the end of the first season, there were 250 laughing gulls and common terns in 30 nests on the island. And during the second year, there were 350 birds. So a couple years later, Renee and I interviewed Jackie for contextualizing the public in social practice projects, a chapter of a companion to public art, about the way that she approaches working with others. She spoke about how she forges her role as a listener, a translator, and a catalyst to provide opportunities for people to recognize their own creative agency and to imagine and envision how they may be part of the change in their environment. And I think that this attitude is something that is really important for collaborations in art and ecology, and is something that I see in all the artists that we're talking about today. And it certainly was the case here, and also at Jackie's project in Fargo, North Dakota. After Jackie's untimely death in 2015, Amy Lipton and I curated Of Nature, a retrospective of Jackie's work with the guidance from her widow, Terry Ayacuzo. While we had each visited Jackie in her studio many times, it was eerie to be here without her. However, we sensed her presence as we unearthed her early sculptures that were all kind of clustered in various areas of the studio. We opened flat files that contained amazing drawings that had never been shown and possibly never seen before. For Jackie, the studio, which she maintained for nearly 4 decades, was a place of creativity, study, and experimentation that gave her the base to be working as an artist in public. And here we see those same sculptures as part of the retrospective exhibition. She describes her first 2 decades as a sculptor as a period of introversion, where she learned to listen subtly and responsively to the materials while working with concepts, images, and emotions and physical energies that came from herself. Over the next 20 years, she embarked on the ecological restoration work that we just saw, that went beyond science and practical function by addressing societal, cultural values that connect people to their natural systems. Of Earth and Cotton is the project that steered Jackie beyond the studio, and as she followed the westward migration of the Cotton Belt, and this began in 1994 and was completed in 1998. She went from place to place, speaking with people who had picked cotton by hand in the 1930s and 40s, meeting individuals in their homes. She sat on the ground and made sculptured portraits of their feet using soil from the nearby fields. The project was exhibited in multiple university galleries throughout the South, each time gaining new sculptural feet. And here it is displayed in her studio on this palette, and then in the gallery as part of the retrospective. And I show these early works to make the point that not all artists begin as public artists or ecological artists, but that their early training is transformative to their point of view as an artist. And there's often certain projects that really launch them into a new way of working. So some of the features that I think are really important to art and ecological collaborations, as we've seen, are that they're research-based. They involve multiple disciplines. There's an open-ended inquiry that's supported and an ongoing relationship to a site or topic. There's flexible timelines that are determined by natural processes, not necessarily human timetables. And multiple types of support and partnerships are needed to facilitate the work. In the next section, I'm going to talk about Matt Jensen, Jan Munn, Nikki Lint, and Brooke Singer, who are actively working today. They collaborate with scientists and other environmental thinkers and activists. At times, their connections to these people and to the sites are supported by residencies that may extend over the long term or allow for repeated visits over time or at different times of the year. And I'm a firm believer that it's important to have an ecosystem with many different kinds of residencies that can support the different functions different things that artists need. And towards this end, we started the Winter Workspace at Wave Hill in 2010. From January to March, when the grounds are quiet and the gallery was closed, the spaces were turned over to artists to use as studios for 6-week sessions. The artists are encouraged to study the plant collection in the greenhouses and on the grounds, and to enjoy the peace and quiet of winter. It's a rare opportunity for artists to be in nature without leaving the city. And as you can see here, artists have the opportunity to share their practice with visitors through participatory workshops and open studios. I might add that there's not a place for artists to live, so it's just the daily studio they have access to. And it was a special time for us as curators to get to know the artists and their working processes, and also for our staff actually to see the creative process up close over each session. It also provided a chance to work with artists whose work hadn't fit into one of our exhibition themes. So here we see Jan Munn in her Winter Workspace studio in 2014. She also did a sunroom project entitled Profile US Invasive Species. Jan's a Brooklyn-based artist who creates social sculptures working with digital and living media. She engages the landscape as a framework to tell stories by combining artistic and scientific processes that take the form of interactive installations, photography, performance, and bioart. And in the case of the winter workspace, she set up kind of a laboratory for growing different plants. Since 2012, she's engaged in remediation and education as an artist in residence at Newtown Creek, a Superfund site in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And here we're looking at the fairy rings, mycorrhizal remediation at Exxon Petroleum Remediation Site. It was her first project in collaboration with the Newtown Creek Alliance and ExxonMobil. The installation is located in the northeastern corner of the site, where you can see these white pipes are the wells that are used to monitor the progress of the cleanup of the oil plume caused by over 150 years of operations by the oil and gas industry. So here we see the installation in progress with crews that are working to build these maze of restorative rings. On the right, we see the oyster mushrooms growing, and their mycelium is contained within these bundles of straw and wood chips within burlap bags. Jan notes that oyster mushrooms are especially apt at two major functions: to neutralize hydrocarbons present in petroleum products such as oil, pesticides, and herbicides, and as a hyperaccumulator to absorb heavy metals, especially mercury, that are common toxins found in landfills and urban environments. The sculptural form of the ring is an alliance between the material structure and nature participates through the ongoing process of sprouting the mushrooms, with the mycelium decomposing and holding the potential for cleansing the land of toxins for the next era. Jan has continued to expand the fairy ring concept through research and community engagement as a board member of the Newtown Creek Alliance and as an independent artist and researcher. And here she was the designer in residence at the New York Hall of Science and advanced the fairy ring project through micro-remediation mother patch. And what we're looking at here are some dioramas that she built that show the aerial view of Newtown Creek with the street grid superimposed. And the mycelium in this image in the center, the mycelium are planted in the diorama. And about a month later, we see how quickly they've grown and grown into mushrooms. So since Newtown Creek is on the border of Queens and Brooklyn, it's not far from the New York Hall of Science in Flushing Meadow Corona Park. And the project helps to orient visitors to the role of remediation in a nearby inaccessible site. Here's an example of one of the posters that functions as a handbook and was displayed for distribution. We also included the project in Ecological Consciousness Artists as Instigator at Wave Hill in 2018. So more recently, Jan has been organizing gatherings that bring scientists to Newtown Creek and citizen science remediation activities to the creek's edge. The next artist we're going to talk about is Matthew Lopez Jensen. He's a Bronx-based interdisciplinary artist whose rigorous explorations of landscape combine walking, photography, and mapping and social practice. His projects investigate the relationships between people and local landscapes and bring those relationships to light through different modes. Here's Matt in his Sunroom Project space, but he also was in the Winter Workspace program where he investigated the eastern and western shorelines of the Bronx that were the basis for this project. So Matt has investigated many types of environments, most recently the Erie Canal from end to end, but in these two projects I'm showing are his focus on street trees. He was an artist in residence with the New York City Urban Field Station and is a certified citizen pruner to care for street trees. He's a community gardener and part of the New York Urban Forest Task Force. He drew on these experiences to create, and his vast photographic documentation of street trees when making the New York City tree tarot deck. So for centuries, humans have seen themselves in trees, and this 78 card tarot deck articulates this age-old tradition. It's designed to represent the broad range and spectrum of emotional and psychic states. The cards can be read like any tarot deck, but the symbolic imagery is unique to the circumstances that surround New York's street trees and their relationship to the surrounding forces that are evidenced in their care and stewardship or lack thereof. And here's just a sampling of some of the images of the trees and their various situations. Matt debuted the deck at the World Forum of Urban Forests in October 2023. Over 1,000 guests from 60 countries were in attendance, and there was tremendous interest in the deck and in having Matt do readings, which was really, he noted was really meaningful for him to be able to do the readings with people who understand and love trees as much as this audience. So here we see how what the card looks like with an example of a tree and then a description of how the tree functions in its environment. I recently visited Matt and did a reading with him, and this is one of the cards that I pulled, the White Oak Tower card, which functions in a similar way as the Tower card does in a traditional deck. However, this card that sort of focuses on despair, repair, and adaptation. I did the takeaway of the adaptation in my reading of thinking about my present. Through his work as an educator, Matt is orienting students to nature and urban settings. And so this is kind of a backyard project for him. He lives very nearby the location of the Mashalou teaching forest. The project poses the question of what do you do with a semi-abandoned 20-acre forest in the middle of a neighborhood, in the middle of the Bronx, surrounded by schools and public transit? And the answer is that you restore, replant, clean, and connect the forest to the community to create a space for learning and establish pathways for students to pursue green careers. And here we see Matt has involved hundreds of students from different types of programs in the restoration of the forest. And when you pull out the weeds and everything, you also have to plant. So they're the students from the Worldview High School across the street have been involved in replanting with wildflowers. Also, when you start to clean through the forest, you find different treasures like the largest sassafras tree in the Bronx. While he's partnering with the New York City Parks Department and various schools, this is essentially an artist-initiated project. Matt's tireless work and vision is the backbone of this ongoing transformation. And this project brings to mind two other artist-focused landscapes in New York City. Time Landscape, the upper pair of photos by Alan Sonfist, is on the corner of Houston and LaGuardia Place in Lower Manhattan. And this project, which began in 1965, and we see it as a concept drawing on the left, has been cared for by the Parks Department for many years. The pair of photos below are Houston Latta's Allen Street Mall that was initiated in 2008, and it is a DOT project where the artist designed the street median, and the artist has become the caretaker. So Houston is constantly cleaning and caretaking for the Allen Street Mall. It's in a similar way that Matt is caring for the forest. So now I'd like to shift to a project that I've been working with Jean Bardo, the director of Stanford Gallery and Community Center in the Bay Ridge section of the Bronx. I mean, of Brooklyn. And this has been a really great opportunity for me to work on a really grassroots ecological art project that's very connected to the community through Janine's work of running the gallery. So the project itself was a kind of core of 14 artists that created projects throughout the neighborhood. And here's the kind of hub of the gallery where the projects originate and each artist is represented. And then the projects which involved both performances, different kinds of engagements, and projects that were up for the 2 months of the exhibition include, I just want to actually with this map orient you to where we are. Bay Ridge is the section of Brooklyn which is connected to the Staten Island through the Verrazano Bridge. So this body of water, the Verrazano Narrows, is when you're standing on this shoreline, you're facing Staten Island and you have this incredible panoramic view of the whole New York Harbor, including Manhattan and New Jersey. So we had projects along the Shore Road. There's a group of projects that were clustered at the American Veterans Memorial Pier, Owl's Head Park, the Bay Ridge Branch Library, the Alpine Cinema, which hosted the film series. We worked with the Fifth Avenue merchants to have projects in the storefronts, and then a cluster of projects that were around the gallery. We're going to be doing the project again next year, and I'm excited that the next Jan, who we met in the previous 2 artists, will be part of it, and Brooke Singer will be part of the next iteration. For this version, we began working about 15 months earlier, which gave the artists time to develop their proposals, to garner permission and funding support. And most supporters were new to the gallery. Some, like the Brooklyn Council on the Arts and Department of Cultural Affairs, are kind of go-tos for arts projects. But thanks to Janine's team, who enthusiastically canvassed the local businesses, we got support from a broad range of businesses in the community. So I wanted to introduce one of the artists who was part of this 2023 iteration of Bay Ridge through an ecological lens, and that is Nikki Lint. Nikki, like Matt, was an artist in residence with the New York City Urban Field Station, where she was connected with scientists who helped her advance her underground sound project, which she's been developing for a few years. And she created an underground sound walk, which was an audio walk in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. She's really interested in revealing, what do we hear under the ground? There's always sounds everywhere and they're not audible to us. So here we see her in Alaska, in the Arctic, where she began visiting in Alaska in 2018 on her own, and has since connected with biologists and river experts through the University of Alaska and the Northern Alaskan Environmental Center. And we see her here listening to the sound of thawing permafrost on the left and recording the river ice breakup on the right. She is now working with the University of Alaska Museum of the North in Fairbanks on a project that will include an exhibition of sound with interviews and paintings and a sound walk. And she'll be returning to interview Inuit people who are living through this climate change and losing their habitat to the melting and the river ice breakup. So an important part of Nikki's work is that she does the sound recordings in situ, and while she's there, she takes video and makes visual studies, and then returns to her studio to make paintings that reflect on the environment as a way of bringing this experience together, the paintings and the sound, together to people who can't experience the place. So here we're looking at the project that she did in Bay Ridge, and on the left we see the sign that's on the pier that it's a fishing pier that people could, through the QR code, they could listen to the underground sound of the underwater sound of recordings that Nikki had taken from this location. And she paired that sound with interviews with 3 community members who are very connected to the bay, including a fisherman from the pier, a cold water swimmer, and a retired New York City Police Department lieutenant who has turned aquatic ecologist and environmental activist and is also a professor in ecology. So their observations were part of the, became part of the narrative. And in the center, we see an example of the painting that she created that brought together these sounds and voices, and an example of how it was displayed in the gallery where people could listen to the sound. So by now we've seen a lot of different examples of out of the box places for artists to be active. And while I was at Nikki's studio, I watched a 4-minute short film about thawing permafrost and melting rivers that she recently created for COP29, the UN climate change conference that was just in November. And it was really exciting to see her be able to present this work as part of the conference. So the final artist we'll talk about is Brooke Singer. And here we're looking at an example of how we presented Carbon Sponge, her ongoing project that was featured at Wave Hill's exhibition, Ecological Consciousness, Artists as Instigator. So like the earlier show with Patricia and Jackie, this was an opportunity to show projects that were not happening on our site, but in this case, were happening in sites throughout New York City. As background, Brooke engages in technoscience as an artist, educator, non-specialist, and collaborator. Her works live on and offline in the form of websites, gardens, workshops, and public art that involves the pursuit of social change. So Carbon Sponge stewards land, let's go to the next slide. Carbon Sponge stewards land to grow and retain carbon in the soil for the benefit of microbes, plants, people, and climate. So this is the first iteration that was initiated at the New York Hall of Science when Brooke was a designer in residence. And it began with these experimental plots to study soil dynamics. So here we see the team is building the plots that are actually in the shape of a carbon molecule. And on the right, we can see how some of the examples of the test garden function really well, and some of them didn't. So this project involved a lot of hard work from the student interns and to care for the garden. And then you can see in the list on the left, there's a lot of different types of science and gardening organizations that were involved in creating this project. And the scientists, Dr. Sarah Engdorf and Dr. Mahadib, have been working with Brooke on this project and are working with her on the next iteration of Carbon Sponge. So here they're testing the soil from the different plots. So this first iteration led to the next one at White Feather Farm. This diagram shows, so through their research, they decided to make sorghum be the center, the focus of the next iteration, because it's a crop, it's fast growing, it is really good at sequestering carbon. And here we see a drawing that puts that at the center of the cycle. In this this is an in-ground farm study. So again, she's working with the scientists with additional input from the folks at the farm to study the white grain sorghum, which we see growing here. And they're looking at ways that sorghum can mitigate the climate chaos to improve the health of a range of species and build overall resiliency. So we look forward to bringing sorghum to Bay Ridge in the spring. Here's we're hopeful that we can get permission to, we have a number of different sites we'd like to work with, and this is one of them. And hopefully we'll be able to get permission to do this project, and we'll have actually a total of 13 artists in all. So stay tuned for more information about this. So in closing, I just wanted to sort of talk about some of the types of support and partnerships that I think are really important to facilitate these collaborations in art and ecology. There's multiple types of residencies, both formal and informal, that can support the ongoing relationships to a site or topic that include access to communities, research opportunities, and time for reflection. These kinds of projects can gain funding from arts, science, and community entities. I think there's a little bit of a slippery slope where for some funders, they're not arts enough, and for some funders, they're not science enough. But I think there's some, in the examples that we're looking at, there's been able to find some common ground. There have been some really positive government funding of projects, which who knows what will happen in the future with the upcoming changes in our federal government. But it was encouraging for me to see that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has an artist in residence pilot initiative for the Passaic River in New Jersey and the Harlem River in New York. And it was just announced that the nonprofit Hudson River Foundation, in partnership with other organizations in the region, is administering a call for artists, which just went out last week. So that's on their website, and really exciting to see an opportunity for an artist to work there. I think there's lots of ways that we can make space for artists in nonprofit in non-art organizations. Examples we've seen here are as a board member, advisor, or artist in residence. I think we also have an opportunity to make connections between artists and non-art entities in the community when we're working on these kinds of projects. A lot of times the artists are doing it themselves, but the help that we as organizations can give them is crucial. And as I've shown through my own practice, there are so many ways that we as curators and administrators can provide and activate platforms to share these kinds of collaborations broadly beyond their place of origin. They simply don't get enough daylight, and they're really, really important ways that artists are affecting our communities. So this is what I've hoped to do today, is to open up these examples to you. And I thank PAX for providing this platform for me to share these. So thank you for joining me to Fertile Earth Collaborations in Art and Ecology. And you can reach out to me, and I'd love to hear from you about the projects that you're doing. Thank you.
Jennifer, what a great talk. I'm so glad you were willing to give it again, and that we could record it so more people could see it. I know you told me at the original presentation there were such good questions, and I'm sorry you're only going to get a couple questions from me right now. And I apologize for anyone whose questions are not recorded for all time. One thing I really loved about your talk is how you started with Jackie and Patricia, right? Those were and looking at the expanse of their work, right? They worked on such big, important projects. I mean, designing a whole water treatment plant, water filtration systems. And then you kind of segue to artists who are maybe at a different point in their career, so thank you for that, right? It's just very encouraging to see if this is a content that you're interested in as an artist, you don't have to go from that interest to designing a water treatment plant, right? There's all of these you can make a tarot deck card for trees. I love that. I love that project. I'm curious because you've worked with so many artists who engage with non I would say non-arts focused peers, artists who work with scientists or, other environmental peers. Like if you're an artist just beginning in this field, have you seen artists make those connections? Right? Like what are some things that you've seen have been successful for artists to kind of build those relationships?
Thanks for that question. I think that I think first of all is like whether your interest is in composting or whether your interest is in a particular location. Look at where your interest is and find others that share that. Because with these types of projects, where the interest is not just in art, the interest is in the environment, is in the place. And what I have noticed is many artists, they might get involved in a cleanup at the site, in community activities. So one way is to kind of go in through the community, like who in the community is also shares those interests. And then like scientifically, look at like if in your nearby universities, are there people that are studying, that are studying these issues? Are there look for research papers about the topic. I think that like Nikki Lint's an example of somebody who she's really sought out scientists who are interested in permafrost and some of whom she's met. So some of whom she's gotten a residency that was specifically art and science. So there are those kinds of residencies and that you can look for, but you can also look for scientists that are working with the topics that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And also other artists who are working in this area. I find that artists are pretty generous in wanting to talk to each other about working with these specific topics.
Yeah, I love what you just said about the focus is on the place or focuses on the topic. And it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be that they have art in common because you already have something in common, which is a really intense interest in
yeah,
permafrost. I
yeah,
think one of the things artists and scientists have in common is innate curiosity,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
observation
absolutely.
skills, right? And so there's like a nice commonality there. The
Yeah,
other thing that I was just thinking about, and I'm so glad you included so many images of installations at Wave Hill, being a botanical garden and how you built that really like content bucket. It's like all of the exhibitions are about the environment in
yeah,
some way there, and how you probably had a lot of people who were really just coming to look at like nice cactuses in the greenhouse, like may have come through the gallery and experience, art, like Jan Munn's project about
yeah.
plants in a totally different way. So I guess I have a similar question about audience, like how have you seen artists connect with audiences in a way that you're like, oh my God, like I just saw someone's like heart, mind, eyes open up when they like encountered this artist project, like to a content that maybe they didn't think about before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was like the joy of working at Wave Hill for me was to be able to have the content in the experience in the gallery be paired with the experience of the garden. So it was very different to see an exhibition there than if it was in Chelsea, for instance, where you're not surrounded by plants. So I think that trying to create a place where the visitor can have that kind of aha feeling. And the place I saw it the most was in the winter workspace
Hmm.
because we would have open studios and we had drop-in studios and we really tried to provide a chance for that connection to happen between people and artists, visitors and artists. And it was the scale of it was such that it was very intimate, right? You're walking into their artist's special studio. You're not having, the artists don't have to open their home studio. They're
Yeah,
at their Wave Hill demonstration site.
they're at the
And
office. Yeah,
they're in their office
exactly.
and they can also set up something like they're testing something. They can set up
Yeah,
something to test to see like, does this make sense to people? Are they interested in it?
yeah.
And that whole testing idea is something that can be done in many, I mean, exhibitions, residencies, you can set that up
Yeah.
for people. And I found that also a botanic garden, I mean, and first of all, I want to say there's like the Denver Botanic Garden, there's other botanic gardens and nature centers that are doing this kind of work. So you know, I feel like in the period of time I've been working in the field, there's like more and more opportunities for artists to work in these kinds of institutions, and more opportunities for visitors to
Hmm.
see art in these kinds of contexts.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. Your last slide about like how do you, if you're a traditional public art program, whatever that means, or a public art colleague, like how can you support this work? It's interesting to see projects like Patricia's that were probably funded through capital dollars to
Yeah,
make that sewage treatment plant, right?
yeah,
But also, it's like you look at what you accomplished at Wave Hill, right? Like you your the cure decide the botanical garden deciding to be a site for art, right? It's like a natural place for a botanical garden to be collaborating with a local arts organization, a local public art program that maybe, goes around all the rules of capital dollars. So it wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily have to be like a formal percent for art initiative, right? But it could just be a partnership that's helping artists interested in connecting, you know, um, helping connect artists who are interested in these topics with a platform that meets an audience that's also
right.
interested in these topics.
Right,
Um,
and also sort of thinking about it, so like if you're a public art program and you want to do a project around birds, like
yeah,
who are the experts of birds and the people involved with birds in your community, whether they're birding groups or the formal organizations, like having them be part of your team, not just the users of the building and the people that are involved in the typical public art panel. If you want to introduce content that veers in a different direction than your project team,
yeah,
um, reach into the community for it.
yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. That's
And
very
I think that's
interesting.
also where the point about building bridges. So if you have the artist, like we think about building bridges to the community, to the neighborhood, but building bridges to the content,
Mhm.
um, is also something that I think, and again, people are doing this all over, but it's really critical in these type of art and ecology projects.
Yeah, because it's complex content that different people are going to access in different ways. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
it's interesting to see the array of ways that people present the content
Yeah,
through an artistic lens.
yeah,
Yeah, I really loved your talk. Can I ask you to just read one thing again? I
sure.
Patricia Johansson's definition of success,
Oh, okay.
if you can find it. And if you can also just zoom
Yeah,
back to the
I
beginning of
should,
this talk, because I just want to hear that again.
um, yeah, okay, so it's the next page. Um, Actually, so, yeah, someone wrote me about this. I got an email from someone from the original
Mhm.
talk about
Yeah,
how much they liked hearing this. Okay. My projects succeed if they perform as intended, if people like them, and if life perpetuates itself within the functional and aesthetic framework. By that measure, this is a highly successful project.
yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah,
Oh, and she wrote that when we did that exhibition, we asked the artists that question, like what, how did they measure success in the
yeah,
project? That was her answer.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you
so
for that.
I, which I think is a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah, me too. Do you have any questions for the audience, Jennifer? I'm kidding. It's just me. Don't ask me anything. Anything else that you like, maybe someone else asked that you're like, oh, that was a good question, and any answer you bring
Yeah,
back.
I mean, some people asked about connecting, how do artists connect with scientists?
Mhm.
And I think the other that I found that it's like other kinds of collaborations, you want people to come together to you rather than, matching people together or
Yeah,
want to create, like the Urban Field Station residency, they are already a network of scientists. So they have the net, and that is one of the things that's great about that residency is that they can connect people because they are, you know, a consortium of scientists. So,
yeah,
um, and I can't, there were really some really good questions.
yeah. There's a lot of, I remember you saying there was questions about why sorghum, right?
Yes.
Did you find out the answer? No, I'm kidding.
Well, and also a lot of Wendy Foyer was on the call, and there was a question about this new EPA artisan residence initiative, and there were this artisan residence initiative in some government agencies in
Yeah.
the Biden administration, and she pointed out that there's a lot of interest in that, and that the next 4 years may not be the most fertile time with the federal government, but to be pursuing these kinds of things at other levels, at other governmental levels. And I think the Erie Canal is a good example of, they have this artisan residence now for artists
Mhm.
doing things along the Erie Canal. So they're some kind of quasi-government agency doing that. So I think we all have to look for different ways to open the doors to artists
Yeah, yeah.
and work.
Great closing. Well, I'd like to just mention one more time that this talk was sponsored by Public Art Exchange. And, I'm part of the programming committee with Laura Zorch McDermott. And you can reach out to us if you have an idea for a program that you would like to organize. We host shop talks where we kind of get into the weeds as public art people about certain topics. PAX talks like this one, sometimes it's a panel. And I don't know, maybe you have a new idea for a different kind of program. And if you're just like, God, I just love PAX so much, and it's amazing they do all this stuff for free, which it is. Yeah, if you want to give some change over to PAX, you can find us at Venmo at Public Art Exchange. So thank you, Jennifer. It's great to see you today.
Thank you, Renee.
Goodbye, public art people.
Bye.